So vision, V.I.S.I.O.N, stands for very important sight into our new life.
Amen.
I don't know about you, but I like acronyms. If you notice, my first message was also acronyms. But that's how I learn, yeah? That's how I remember things too. Like growing up, I always, to help me remember there's certain things, I would put acronyms to them. So I think that's why, both of my messages are acronyms. But anyways, so my 6 points. When I came up with, when I got the 6 points, I thought about Arnie's joke last week. Don't ask the preacher question because they'll give you five points, right? Well, I guess I overextended that. I got 6. So, point number 1, visions from God are powerful. Point number 2, visions are understood by godly people. Vision number 3, visions reveal future events. Vision number 4, visions guides us and reveals His will for us. Number 5, visions from God ought to be accepted and obeyed. And number 6, visions when followed brings blessings. So again, I just want to repeat the verse that Brother Arnie read, Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. We will get back to this verse later. But first, let us define vision. What is vision? According to the online dictionary, vision is an experience of seeing someone or something in a dream or trance, or as a supernatural apparition. So our scripture story takes place in Egypt. This is actually a continuation of what happened to Joseph from my last message. So let's recap. Jacob had 12 sons, but he favored one, and that's Joseph, because he was the firstborn of his wife Rachel, whom he loved very much. And because Joseph was the favorite son, he was hated by his brothers, and they wanted to kill him. But instead of killing him, they sold him to merchants as a slave, and they took him to Egypt, where he was sold to Potiphar. Then Joseph was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and was put in jail. He was in jail for over 2 years, and this is where our story tonight begins. Genesis chapter 41. I know it is a long chapter, it's 51 verses, but bear with me because God has an awesome message for us tonight. It's going to be up on the screen because it is King James Version, and the Bibles in front of us are NIV. So it'll be up there. You can read along with me. So here we go. Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat flesh, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean flesh, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean flesh kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke, verse 5, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Verse 9. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me inward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. Verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment, and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the brink of the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat flesh, and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. Verse 19. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and lean flesh, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke. Verse 22. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. Verse 24. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians. But there was none that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he shown unto Pharaoh. Everybody still with me?
Yes.
Verse 29, Behold, there came 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Verse 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh. And let them keep food in the cities, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this man, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God has shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the 2nd chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Sephnath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, and the food of the field which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. Verse 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, He hath made me forget all my toil, and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness there that was in the land of Egypt were ended. Verse 54. And the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses, and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. That's 57 verses, everyone. Give yourself a hand. You made it through. All right. All right. So, point number 1. Visions from God are powerful. Verse 8 starts, And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. The vision had such an impact on Pharaoh that his spirit was troubled. There is a stir in our spirit, and it just sticks. We try to forget it, but it just keeps coming up. It's like a movie playing on repeat in our mind. For those of you who has children may have experienced this, where your child wants to watch the same thing over and over and over. You want to change it or even turn it off, but you can't. Or they will cry and cry until you put it back. Emily was like that. Or for those Star Wars fans, it's like saying, there's a disturbance in the force. Oh, you know where the Star Wars fans are. But why is this powerful? I believe it is because it came to someone with great power and authority on earth. Did you know that Pharaoh is a title? It is an Egyptian king whom is considered to be a god to the Egyptian people. But we know there is only one God, and his name is?
Jesus.
Yes, Jesus.
Hallelujah.
So we have here the Egyptians' earthly God, non-Christian nonetheless, being troubled in his spirit. Who can do that if not for one that is greater than him? It says in verse 32, For that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. See, the dream came to Pharaoh twice. Usually when something comes up more than once in the Bible, comes up twice or more in the Bible, it means God is serious.
Amen.
It is something not to be taken lightly. So for us Christians, there would be a disturbance or a stirring in our spirit. So what do we do with that? I'm glad you asked. We must pray and seek godly counsel. We must pray that God may grant us or others spiritual discernment. This leads to my second point. Visions are understood by godly people. The second part of verse 8 says, And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them in his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then it says from verse 9 to 13, talks about the chief butler remembering Joseph. And he told Pharaoh what happened in jail, and how the chief baker and him had dreams which Joseph interpreted for them. Then it happened just as Joseph had told him. So Pharaoh called for Joseph. Verse 50. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Pharaoh is telling Joseph, no one can understand my dreams, but I heard you can. I want you to get this picture. Pharaoh, the king, Egyptian king, their God, is talking to a slave, is asking a slave for help. And how does Joseph respond to that? It says it here in verse 16. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace.
Hallelujah.
I just love this verse.
Amen.
Because you see, verse 46 tells us that Joseph is 30 years old at this time. And I've read that he was about 17 years old when he was taken to Egypt. So that's like 13 years of being a slave. I'm sure you would come to know that Pharaoh is considered a god in the country for, being in there for 13 years. So you would be taught how to act and talk, right? But that didn't stop Joseph. He answered Pharaoh with boldness and confidence and told him, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. That is awesome.
That is awesome.
It's like Joseph saying, there is one greater than you, Pharaoh.
Amen.
And he knew it because God was with him. You see, church, only those in tune with God will be able to understand the vision. Everyone knows Lola, right?
Yes.
If you don't, Lola means grandma in Ilocano. That's why I call Lola Lorena Lola. She's my mom's mom. She's in the back. Lola, wave hello.
Hi, Lola.
I didn't tell her that I was going to share this with you, so I hope she doesn't mind.